Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session at Build. Excited to have you all here. We're going to give it a few more minutes to get some more attendees. It's great to see a lot of you joining us. Today, we have a good group from the product team, and we're excited to come and chat with you. We represent some of the teams within Identity, and we're here to talk about anything related to Azure Role-Based Access Control, RBAC, Managed Identity for Azure Resources, Microsoft Identity Platform, and the Microsoft Authentication libraries, amongst other things. So super excited to be with you all.
Okay, I see a question here. Are you going to release an MSAL library for Flutter or Dart? Daryl, I see you're responding to that question. Do you want to go ahead and talk about the answer? Oh, you're muted there, Daryl.
Sorry, my name is Daryl. I'm the engineering manager for the MSAL team, specifically for the JavaScript platform. So I'm answering the question, are we going to release an MSAL library for Flutter or Dart? I will say currently that is not on our roadmap. We just GA'd our Angular library. We are working, in the next calendar year to get React and Vue going. That's in our backlog. And I would say after we have tackled some of those, we will definitely look at the rest of the JavaScript ecosystem and do our best to meet customers where they're at, but it is currently not in our backlog. Or roadmap.
Cool. Hey, thank you, Daryl, for answering that question. I see a question here that I can answer. How to provide RBAC for microservices. Hi, my name is Stuart Kwan. I'm a program manager in the identity team, and I work on roles-based access control, managed identity, and I've worked on a bunch of other identity services in the past. The RBAC for microservices is something that we're very interested in making some investment in. We see a trend where people are breaking their applications up into sets of microservices, each with independent functions, but then often you want to have a consistent access control model for your application within those microservices. So it makes sense if there was a microservice that was providing an access control capability where you could program in things like, let's say it took a roles-based access control approach, where you could program in roles and the definitions of those roles, that you could assign users and groups to those roles, and then your microservices could call that RBAC microservice, if you will, and ask, can this user take this action on this resource? And that microservice could come back with a grant or deny. So that's something that we're interested in doing. We haven't made any announcements about it yet, but we think that we can take a lot of the componentry that we've already built, like the RBAC system that's inside Azure itself, and make it available as a service that you could use when you're building your application. So if you're interested in a capability like that, stay tuned. We haven't made any announcements. We're investigating, and also upvote that question if it is something that you would be interested in using if we could provide such a service on Azure. Okay, let's take a look at other upvoted questions. There was another one I saw. Oh, custom claims. So yeah, Jenny already answered the custom claims question, how to configure those in the portal. We've got a B2C question here, which I'm not sure if we have anyone on the line here today who can authoritatively answer that question about plans for FIDO support in Azure AD B2C. Is there anybody in the presenting group who's ready to answer that one? I don't think so. I think there's a separate session on B2C though. All right. Let's take a look through other questions. How about...
Hey, Stuart.
Yeah.
I see a question there that you might be able to do an answer for. Is there any plan to introduce a hierarchy for Azure AD in order to localize account and directory management?
Any plan to introduce A hierarchy for Azure. Oh, okay. To yes. So to do, I think the question here and is about being able to do delegated administration within Azure AD. So let's say you have a group of users that belongs to one department, you have a group of users that belongs to another department, and you want to be able to delegate, this administrator can manage just those users in that department, this administrator can manage just those other users in that other department. We recently put into public preview a feature called administrative units, which lets you take users and groups and associate them with this new container, if you will, an administrative unit, and then assign administrators roles such that they can only manage the objects that are in that admin unit. So it's actually a capability that we've had in public preview for quite some time, but just recently we added a portal UX for it so that it's much easier to find and manage. And we're looking to take that capability now through to general availability. So do look for administrative units as a way to do delegated administration within an Azure Active Directory tenant. I'll answer that here. And when someone starts answering another question, I'll go get a link for you for that one. There's a question here about the Oauth implicit flow. Oh, I see, Daryl, you've already taken a shot at answering it. Do you want to add any more color, Daryl, on that one?
Yeah, and I would also say if Jenny or Henrik have anything to add, please do. But I believe best practice is that cracking open access tokens is not recommended. They are meant to be opaque, and even though JOTs are often returned and you can decode those, it's sort of an implementation detail. And in the future, if encrypted tokens are implemented, your code will break. And so we ask that none of your code relies on cracking open access tokens.
Cool, thank you, Daryl. I'm just going to provide that admin unit link. And there was another one around best practice for securing microservice to microservice communications, along with transitioning identities from customer SaaS accounts as well as guest accounts coming from external facing UIs and APIs. Transitioning from, customer accounts. Does the guidance change for service hosting frameworks, Kubernetes versus Azure functions? Is there anyone who wants to take a shot at talking about how we would approach securing microservice to microservice communications? Or are you going to leave that one for me?
Maybe I could take that one.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Said.
Yeah, so what we have today is the ability to do a flow we call on behalf of. So if you wanted to do user delegated flow throughout, meaning each service in the chain, so client calls service A, calls service B, and you want each service in the chain only to be able to access the user data of the user that signed in, then what you do is you'd have a client get an access token to call service A, and then service A would go to the Microsoft Identity Platform and get what we call an on behalf of token with an audience for service B. So service B might be Microsoft Graph. And then it would essentially use a certificate plus the access token it got from the client to do an on behalf of flow and exchange it. We have a new library called Microsoft Identity Web that really makes this scenario a lot simpler. And so there's a preview that we announced at our session earlier today that you should definitely go check out, and I'll find that link and I'll post it on the published Q&A there.
Okay, and okay, so I don't think we have anyone who can answer the AAD B2C FIDO question We've got Chappie's question was answered. We just answered the microservice question. Can we use Azure AD Connect to sync on-premises LDAP non-Active Directory accounts to Azure Active Directory? Ramiro, do you happen to know the answer to that one?
Sure, sir. Hi everybody, my name is Ramiro Calderon. I am a program manager in the Azure AD Get to Production team, and we work with enterprise customers to help them deploy on Azure AD services. So there are some tools within Azure AD Connect. There's a connector that you can use to connect from an LDAP environment getting to Azure AD. However, that's not on the mainline like supported scenarios in terms of like what the documentation is optimized for, but definitely there's some custom connectors that you can use and configure Azure AD Connect in a special way. It would be interesting to understand the scenario better to give you a more detailed guidance based on what you want to achieve. But there are some connectors there, but you're signing up for more complexity in terms of configuring the synchronization engine, but definitely is possible. So I'll find a link and share it in the chat.
Thanks, Ramiro. Jenny, I noticed you answered a question about OpenID Connect, the difference between OpenID Connect and MCell. Do you want to riff on that one for us, just for the rest of the audience?
Yeah, sure, Stuart. It was a question about, my name is Jenny. I'm a developer with the Microsoft Authentication libraries, specifically with MSAL.NET and also with Microsoft Identity Platform, or Microsoft, I don't even remember the name of it, but oh well. So the question was about the difference between OpenID Connect and the MSAL libraries. So OpenID Connect is an authentication and identity layer built on top of OAuth 2.0. And OAuth 2.0 is all about authorization. So it's about gaining access to a protected resource. The problem with that is we don't know anything about the signed in user. So if you wanted to display a customized login page or have any type of customization, you would need to know something about the signed in user. And that's where OpenID Connect comes in. So it's just a layer built on top of OAuth 2.0. And basically what it does is it enables the client to receive an ID token. And the client can then take that ID token and parse the claims inside of it and then display content, customized content for the signed in user. So for example, if you have a web page and you want to show content for users that are 18 and over, you can ask for a claim of age. And then when you get the ID token back, you can display certain content based on the age of the user that is signed into the application. So OADC allows us to have an ID token, which is a really great part for Azure AD B2C, as it's all about customizing the user experience. The MSAL libraries are just authentication libraries which implement these protocols. So you as the application developer, you don't have to worry about implementing these protocols on your own or about authentication or authorization. You can let MSAL do that for you.
Cool, thank you, Jenny, for that comprehensive description about OpenID Connect versus MCell. There was another question I just saw here as I was going through the list that I thought was pretty interesting. Oh yes, because let's see, where did it go? Where did it go? Oh yes, I know why, because I saw my name mentioned. Thanks, Gregorio, for mentioning my video series, my quick video series about authentication protocols and authentication fundamentals. So you had an additional question here. Is there a plan to create a series like this for new programmers or students on how to code for authentication correctly using authentication concepts? Now, I think a series of new videos on building on Azure Active Directory in particular has just gone live. Is there anyone in the Microsoft Identity Platform side of the team that can speak to what's the content of those videos that just went up? Is there anybody?
I do have a slide actually. Let me find it and maybe we can post it here that shows some of the pre-recorded content that we have.
Cool.
Just Just give me a second here.
Find that one. Go ahead and look for that, and I'll scan through the other questions. While Said's looking that up, there's a question here about authenticating between resources in different Azure tenants. I think we can't use MSI if it's different Azure tenants. So maybe Sudhir or Varun, you might want to be ready to answer that one after we go through. Yes, here we go. So Said, this is the, is this the?
Yeah, this is some of the
these build sessions?
Yeah, these are actually on-demand pre-recorded sessions. So this is the team, worked a lot of, spent a lot of time over the last few weeks preparing and recording this content, and was edited together. But it really does allow you to kind of learn at your own pace and pick up some of these topics and see some of our latest and greatest stuff.
I also saw I thought it was an introduction video series that was posted to YouTube on the Identity channel. Are you familiar with that work that just went up?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Oh, okay, because I think that.
I know that. I think that's part of the webinar series we did with Azure AD B2C. So it covers Oauth 2.0, OpenID Connect, and then app integration with Azure AD B2C.
Oh, it's B2C specific.
Yeah.
Well, the OpenID Connect in Oauth 2.0 is not B2C specific, but the other section is.
Cool. Okay. I wonder if anyone has the link to that channel. That
I'll
YouTube
share the
channel.
link in a second.
Cool. Thank you, Arturo.
Yeah,
And
then just a quick comment. We just released some training series on YouTube for the Microsoft Identity platform with our colleagues, and to use the different libraries and multi-tenant apps and the consent framework and all that.
Yeah, that was the one that I was that I was thinking about. If we could get a link to that.
Yeah, I have it. Okay,
I just posted the link and respond to that question.
Awesome. Thank you, Arturo. Now, where did that one go about cross-tenant? Cross-tenant. Here we go. So, Sudhir or Varun, do you want to answer this one about cross-tenant authentication and managed identity? Best way to authenticate cross-tenant?
Sure.
All right, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Varun. I'm a program manager, and I'm mainly focused on managed identities. So today, you cannot use a managed identity to authenticate, to get a token that you can present to another tenant to get authenticated. This is something that we are looking into. So it would be great if we can connect and learn more about the scenario. But unfortunately, this is not possible today.
Cool, thank you. So that's something that we've got in the works. And Sudhir's going to give us a written answer for that one. And we talked about the microservices question. How about, is impersonation a possibility with the current built-in implementation? Who wants to take a shot at answering this? How do you impersonate a user question?
I can venture at that one. I believe there is no way to impersonate a user as of today. It's definitely something that we've heard and we're still kind of collecting feedback on. So feel free to upvote that one if you're interested. We do have, ways of having, users that are part of one role that say had an admin role, and then another set of users that are more like a user role, and then your application could allow admins to do anything that users could do, but that's something that you'd have to implement on your side. That's not something that's provided by the platform.
Alrighty. Thank you, Said, for answering that one. We talked about that one. What else do we have here? Is it possible to add an Azure AD user to a role temporarily and then have the permission expire after a certain interval? We actually have a capability that you can use for this kind of scenario. It's called Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management, and its design use, or its intent, was to be able to have a person be eligible for a particular role, either in Azure, like in an Azure subscription, or even in Azure Active Directory, but not have that role until they activate it. When they activate it, you can require a policy to be met, like perhaps a approval needs to happen, or the user has to do multi-factor authentication or such. So we call that activation and activation policy. And you can also control for how long the user will have that role assignment. So it could be activated and only be allowed to be activated for an hour, for 8 hours, for 24 hours. And then once time has run out, the role will be taken away from the user, and the user will need to reactivate the role to get it back again and potentially pass that policy again. So it's a mechanism that we think is important to use for things like DevOps in your most sensitive Azure subscriptions. You don't want people to have standing root access, if you will, in an Azure subscription or in your Azure Active Directory tenant. We think it's better if during normal operations and when you don't need the access, you simply don't have any access and you activate it when you need it. That's might be a little different than the scenario that you were looking for. I think what the person who's asking the question might have been looking for was a way to say, I want to make a role assignment and I want it to expire after a certain amount of time. So this assignment is going to last for 15 minutes and then it's just going to disappear, poof, after 15 minutes. That's something that we've heard before that we might consider adding to the RBAC system, at least in Azure in the future, and possibly in Azure Active Directory. The two RBAC systems are different, as it turns out, but we are considering whether we would add that kind of feature in the long run, if only from our perspective to make the PIM system a little easier to code, because then it could just create a role assignment with an expiration on it, and then the role assignment would automatically go away, and PIM wouldn't have to maintain any state to remember to come back and take your role assignment away. So the long and short answer to that one is you can look at Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management, or PIM for that, and there may be other ways to do it in the future as well. Let's see, what else do we have here? Any suggestions on how to put network-based controls for service principals? So we can control or put controls for service principals which are given application permissions to directory.read.all. I see. So this is about conditional access, and can conditional access be enforced on service principals? I'm not sure if Ramiro, you want to take a shot at answering that one, or I can take a shot at it.
So the service principals are still not fully integrated with the conditional access plane, but that's a very common ask. I'm not sure, Stuart, if you want to have something else to add on that.
Yeah, so the short answer to that one is, yeah, we hear that one a lot. There are people who want to say something like, this service principal, which happens to have these app permissions in the directory, or happens to maybe have this role in the directory, I only want it to be able to authenticate from this network address range and use conditional access policy to be able to enforce that. So that if someone were to ever steal, or the credentials were disclosed for that service principal, that a bad actor who then squirreled them off and tried to use them from somewhere else that wasn't your network wouldn't be able to use them. So that's a feature that we're very interested in implementing, and it's something that I know that's being actively investigated right now, but we haven't announced when it might be available. There's a couple of other cases that are very similar to this that we're also looking at implementing for things like managed identity, such that managed identity credentials, which are real and under the covers and you never see them, we're looking at ways that we can make those credentials useless unless you happen to be running in the infrastructure of Azure, where the managed identity system does actually employ those credentials. So there's a variety of different controls that we're looking at there, but we haven't, the feature is not available today, and we haven't announced when it will be, but it's definitely something that we're looking at. Let's see, so is there anything I've missed that's really been upvoted? Oh, how is AI being used in Active Directory to protect identities? Varun, I see you just popped an answer in for that one. Do you want to add any color to your answer?
Sure.
Go for it.
So Azure AD sees a ton and ton of authentications from like variety of customers that use Azure AD, right? So we use that data to basically figure out anomalies that exist in the system and create various risk scores associated with sign-ins and use those risk scores to protect identities and flag those identities, automatically promote those identities to require multi-factor authentication and things like that. All of those are offered as conditional access policies under this product called, or like a section of Azure AD called Identity Protection. If you click on the link that I just posted, you should be able to learn more about it. But yeah, the learning part is where the AI gets used heavily.
Cool, thank you, Varun. Yeah, that system deflects many attacks and attempts to compromise accounts today, where it's in use with customers. So we're quite proud of that system. Let's see, what else do we have that hasn't been answered? There's a cert. When is Microsoft going to provide a cert authority and cert management for Azure customers? Unfortunately, we don't have anyone here today who's well set up to answer that question. It's unfortunately, we'll expose some of the organizational structure of Microsoft. The set of people who work on that set of components is in a different division from the identity team. There's a security team which handles that. Let's see, what else do we have? Network-based control. So that one I need to put a written answer on. Does federated identity work with mobile apps without registering the app to Azure Active Directory? If it cannot, then can I register the app as a web app instead of a native app and use Azure AD for SSO? This one's near it's got one upvote here. It's from Hitesh. Is there a member from the developer experience team that wants to take this one on?
Hi, it's Jenny again. I think, I'm not exactly sure, but I would think that federated identities on mobile would work. I know we support ADFS with MSAL.net. I'll look for the question and post.
Yeah, the question is, does it work without registering the app?
So is Azure AD federated to your ADFS on-prem? If ADFS is configured in Azure Active Directory, either through the Connect tool that we have, or it's either set up for federation, I would expect that it would just work, because at that point you're just rendering HTML within a browser window.
I think that one of the key things here is that you do have to register the native client with with Azure AD. The native client needs to be registered, and then whatever API it's calling also needs to be registered with Azure AD. We don't have a facility today where the clients go unregistered and able to call APIs, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, sorry, so you do have to register the app. I posted a link as a response to that question to the
Awesome.
ADFS services. But you do have to register the app first. But then, like Saeed said, it should just work.
And then there is another tool called Application Proxy, which is about wrapping web applications or web APIs that are on premise. And if you have to deploy this application proxy onto your corporate network, and once you've done that, then you can essentially project that out into the cloud so that you can access those web apps or web APIs while you're not on the corporate network, but protected by Azure Active Directory.
All right, cool, thank you. I'm just answering the network-based control service principles question here. Let me just dash that one off. We did this year, we were investigating adding this capability to conditional access. And let me look for a new one that we haven't answered yet.
Hey, Stuart, there was a question about B2B and external identities and how they relate.
Oh, really? Let me think.
Yeah, so let me read the question here. The question was, how are the new external identities handled and merged with existing B2B guest users? Are there prerequisites or underlying data changes to the AAD user accounts to know about? So the external identities preview that we announced today is built on the same exact technology as B2B. So you're inviting B2B guests and you're configuring an identity provider like Google or Facebook, just like you would when we had the B2B feature. So this is really just an extension of B2B. And so these users are provisioned into the directory as guest users. And you can give them access to data in SharePoint or other M365 resources. Your application treats them exactly the same way that you would treat B2B users. The big difference is that we now have self-service sign-up flows. So you can configure a workflow where you send them an invite or a message saying, hey, supplier or distributor, please go through this self-sign-up flow, or maybe you have a first-line worker that's at a storefront and they show up on the first day and their boss says, hey, here's a link to go sign up and get provisioned into the system. And then after they go through that self-service sign-up flow, they're queued to be provisioned as a user, but there's an API that you call to actually allow them into your organization's directory.
Cool, thank you there for that answer, Saeed. I noticed, Arturo, you answered a question here about Azure 8. It is really difficult to get an overview of which Azure AD or Azure role has which permission. Do you want to give some color here for the audience behind your answer to that question?
Sure, definitely.
Whoops.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arturo Lucatero, and I'm one of the PMs on the Azure RBAC team. It's a great question. There was a question about what permissions are the right ones that I need to assign and what role it is. I gave a link to, there's a documentation where we publish every built-in role that we have in Azure RBAC, and it includes all the different permissions that are in those roles. Similarly, we have a page where we describe some best practices on how you should do role assignments. And I tried to link the equivalent documents for Azure AD RBAC. Now, that being said, we have also heard your feedback that how do we do this in the moment where you're giving those role assignments to suggest the proper roles that you want to assign so that your users truly have that least privilege and they can only perform those actions. So it is something we've heard, and so thank you for that feedback as well.
Awesome, thank you, Arturo. Your video was a little slow over here when I was looking at it, but
yeah, thanks for yeah.
I think
sure what's going on there.
We're swamping the internet, man. Build is the thing. We're outstreaming Netflix. So let's see, what do we got here? I see a question from Harish about, is there any plan for attribute-based access control? Let me take a shot at answering that one. Oh, where did it go? I was just looking at it a moment ago. So is there any plan for attribute-based access control? So today, the system that we have for managing access in Azure and also in Azure Active Directory depends on you either assigning a user or a group to a role, and then that role is assigned at a particular scope of resources. So in Azure, you could make a role assignment at the subscription level, or at the say at the resource group level, or even on an individual resource, in order to say this user has the action that can perform the actions this role can perform, but on this scope of resources. And that system, while relatively simple and easy to figure out, it does have some issues if, say, you wanted to grant a user access to a set of resources that were maybe tagged in a particular way, but only the ones that were tagged in a particular way. Or maybe you wanted to take users who were tagged in a particular way and have them only be able to access resources that were tagged in a particular way. So that you could say something like, all users who are tagged as part of the project Zanzibar can have read access to all resources which are tagged as being part of project Zanzibar. And then you would just tag the individual resources and tag the individual users. And then through that single expression of policy that maybe you could put at, say, the subscription level in Azure, the people who are involved in Zanzibar would be able to access the resources that were involved in Zanzibar. Otherwise, you would have to make individual role assignments on individual resources that were part of Project Zanzibar, and that would be a lot more work for you. So it is something that we're looking at pretty closely right now to see how we can augment the access control system that we have in Azure to be able to accommodate these kinds of scenarios. It does involve us being able to do things like tag or use the attributes of resources when you're writing a kind of role assignment, let's say, and like be able to put a condition that says this role assignment only applies if these conditions are true about the resource or the user. And it is something that we're actively investigating right now. We haven't made any announcements yet about when the capability will be available, but definitely stay tuned. Watch the Azure blog and the Azure Active Directory blog for more information about when this capability becomes something that we make available for people to try out, or any of the other capabilities that we're mentioning right now that are in the hopper, things like the conditional access capability for service principals. Do watch our blog. That's where we make announcements about these capabilities and give you the links to follow so that you can try these things out. And if you're part of our advisors community, the Azure advisors community, or the identity advisors community, sometimes you can find out when we're doing private previews of these upcoming capabilities so that you can try those things out. All right. I did a lot of talking there, and I wasn't looking at the questions that were coming by. Does anybody have a suggestion on a question we should tackle next? We'll be watching the published list here.
While we are finding a question, I just thought to say thank you so much for asking these awesome questions. I'm really enjoying answering all these questions. So keep them coming.
Yeah, we've got 89 attendees right now. We're at about 19 minutes left in our session here. It's if in case you're interested, I think everybody who's here and presenting, we're all of us are in the Pacific Northwest, right? Is there anybody in the team that we have today that's not in their home somewhere in the Puget Sound area? I don't think so. I think everybody's here. So it's about 8:42 in the evening here in Redmond, and we're really excited to be part of this marathon 48-hour build event, the first of its kind, with probably more attendees than any build we've ever had before. I think I was reading before we started this evening that there were 100,000 registrations for Build. That's something that we couldn't have been able to do unless we were having an online event like this. So we are very excited to see you, and we're glad to be able to answer these questions. Let's see, what else do we have here? We answered that one already. Are there any plans for speeding up replication of new app registrations and client secrets inside Azure AD? We use the HashiCorp Vault Azure Secrets Engine. Sometimes it takes 30 to 60 seconds before new secrets are available after creation. Let's see, I don't know if we have anyone who's on the line right now who can give advice for how you can maintain affinity for that sort of thing so that you don't have to be exposed to the replication latency. I don't think we have anyone for that. No, we don't. Follow-up question on using ADFS with a mobile app. My company recently started using Intune, and the admin couldn't exclude the native app from conditional access policy because it is a native app, so I was thinking to register it as a web app because it appears in the exclusion list. However, I'm not sure if ADFS will work with my mobile app. That question came in, it's Hitesh's question at 8:40 p.m. Is there anyone from the sing out if you want to take a shot at that one? I'm going to keep scanning through the question list.
I would say that, yeah, ADFS is supported with mobile apps. But again, it depends a little bit on what is needed. When we say ADFS or not, I'm trying to look through this as well. So the real problem here, if I understand this correctly, is that there's certain conditional access policies that are not possible with a mobile app, which I think is probably the better way to try to address this. But ADFS is supported with a mobile app.
Yeah, a quick comment on top of that is that the way we designed the conditional access stack and the integration with the rest of the EMS suite is that the users can choose the hybrid authentication technique based on their environment and requirements. So you can use conditional access or Intune irrespective of your technique to authenticate on-prem. So if you're using ADFS for federation to validate the on-premises credential, that should be orthogonal to how the MDM policies apply to your app. Now you mentioned here that you switched to create as a web app in order to appear in the exclusion list. So we have been working with customers with the exact same scenario, and we have not run into this. So let me find a link for how to configure your applications in Azure AD to properly get the conditional access kick in for you.
Hey, Ramiro, while we've got you on the line, there's a question here from Alexander. What is the best way to synchronize user accounts in HR, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and all other SaaS apps? Is it SCIM? Do you want to take a shot at that one?
Sure. So can you remind me what time was it?
It was 8:19 p.m. from Alexander.
Okay, hold on. Let me scroll up a little bit. What is the best way to synchronize user accounts? Oh, all right. Cool. Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and this is one of the capabilities that we really want our customers to use more. Is that we support what we call outbound provisioning, meaning the information about the users and groups and objects in the directory is flowing from the directory to the applications based on the capabilities that they offer in terms of APIs. So we are working very closely with partners in the industry to standardize around SCIM. So if your application supports SCIM, that's something that by integrating with Azure AD and enable the rollout, the assignment through Azure AD. Let's say you are assigning a group to the app. then the integration with Scheme is going to take that group membership on a regular basis and call the APIs of your SaaS application to keep that role membership consistently and the attributes of the users and the user profiles consistently as well. So absolutely, the SaaS app with Scheme is definitely the way to go. And we have a quick plug here. So customers can also, if the application is not in our application gallery, and they need and you need assistance from our team to kind of look into that, and then we have a team dedicated to increase that set of applications. But any application that supports Scheme should just work out of the box. It's just the one-offs that don't support, and they have custom APIs that we can do special integrations. Good question. I'm gonna put a couple of YouTube videos where we explain how provisioning works for that specific scenarios.
You're muted, Stuart.
Thank you. Never made that mistake before. It's honestly first time ever done that on a Teams live event. So I saw another question here that's been upvoted by Harish, who's been getting a lot of love for their questions here. Are there any suggestions on how to configure attribute-based conditional access, like allow users to access an application from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific and deny the rest of the day? Are there any plans for attribute-based access control rather than RBAC? I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, that we're looking at ways that we can take the RBAC model that we have and introduce conditions in the same way that we have conditions in the conditional access system. So one condition I mentioned was maybe an expiration time that we could put on a role assignment so that the role assignment would be invalid after that time. Equally, we are looking at how we could maybe put conditions on time intervals onto an assignment. So you could say, Bob is assigned this the virtual machine contributor role, but only Mondays through Fridays, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that assignment is ineffective at other times because that condition isn't met. So that's something that we're investigating that could be possible to enable the scenario that you mentioned. And that's in RBAC itself. I know that in the conditional access system, which is upstream from RBAC, if you will, conditional access is enforced when you go to authenticate to a particular resource. So like the Azure portal, for example, or the Azure Management API, before you go there, conditional access policy gets evaluated as you're authenticating. And it can do things like make sure that you're coming from a particular network range, or make sure that you've done multi-factor authentication, and it has a way, rather sophisticated way of deciding if the policy is going to apply to you, whether you're a member of a particular group or etc. So in that conditional access system, I know we're also investigating time of day enforcement on conditional access policies. So that's the gatekeeper, if you will, before getting to Azure. And then we're also within Azure itself, when you're doing more fine-grained access control, like a role assignment, we're looking at ways that we could apply conditions to role assignments for things like time of day, or even conditions based on attributes of resources, conditions based on attributes of users, and then, if you will, just predicates, logic expressions that say this and this and this and this must be met, or this and this or this must be met, sort of thing. And if those things are true, then this assignment applies. If they're not true, then the assignment doesn't apply. So that's something that we're investigating, but again, we haven't made any announcements yet about when that functionality might become available. I'll answer that one in the chat window offline when someone's answering the next question. Let's see if there's anything that's been upvoted. Are there any plans? Oh, yes, Varun just answered this one. Are there any plans to enable logs on the Azure AD side for API calls? This helps to find which users or which service principals are hitting APIs to fetch complete user data or group data. And then you provided a link to the sign-ins. Varun, do you want to put a little color on that answer as well?
Sure. Maybe the question was, I think, trying to go beyond just sign-in logs, but I believe sign-in is the basic activity that you're doing with Azure AD. So the link I posted talks about how you can view sign-in activity logs from Azure AD for all the users. You can also connect these logs to external systems like Azure Monitor or your custom SIEM systems. Hopefully that answers the question.
So we have,
thanks,
we have
Varun.
about 10 minutes left, and I did want to throw something out there. As we have, I guess, as we go into build, is there any top of mind topics that you're hoping to learn about more related to identity at build? If you could let us know.
Thanks, Arturo. I'm scrolling back here through the questions to find one that we can answer that we haven't answered yet. There's been several B2C questions. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one on a way to provision bulk users from one tenant as a guest in another, like a sync method. They say they're cousin companies and want to share resources between them.
Do you happen to know the answer to that one?
I don't. I just thought it was an interesting question.
Awesome. Maybe Ramiro.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So that's a good question. So onboarding guest identities in Azure AD is something you can do through the MS Graph. So there's an resource provider about the invitations. You can do a post to MS Graph and put the details of the email address that you want to invite, as well as some other data that you can. In fact, that's how we use some of this is the technique that we use for some of our customers, and to host this conference, we use that a lot to onboard some of the attendees and producers of the event. So yeah, it's a good question. So check Microsoft Graph. I'll look up the link and I'll post it.
Thanks, Ramiro. There's another question here that maybe someone from the platform team can answer. Can we use app registrations to manage user access for an application that is hosted? If there are any samples, can you please point to them in the chat? Can you use app registration to manage access for a hosted application? Does anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, maybe I can take that one. So there is actually two separate views of applications within the Azure Active Directory system. One is the developer view, which is when you're registering your apps. And then there's a totally separate view, which has to do with it's called the Enterprise Applications Blade, that has to do with IT management of applications within your organization environment. And so as a developer, you're just registering your apps and you're getting authentications up and running. And then in the Enterprise Blade is where there's more of the management of users' assignment to particular applications. And I'm not entirely sure, but I believe there's a way of controlling access to applications in the Enterprise Applications Blade. I'd have to take a look.
Well, thank you, Said, for that answer. By the way, I noticed that Jean-Marc, I think, had posted a handy, or who was it? Someone posted. There are several questions for Azure AD B2C, and we didn't happen to have an Azure AD B2C expert here today in this talk, but there is a session on Azure AD B2C where you'll probably be able to answer these same questions. And I thought I saw someone post in the discussion in the live Q&A a link to that particular talk. So please do check out that B2C talk. We've got about 5 minutes left. There was there was a question I saw here that was pretty nifty about what was it? It was from Alexander, and where did it go?
Maybe as you find that one, Stuart, I can just add, there were a question on Java libraries And both our Android and the Java library can both be found on Maven. They are both written in Java. I think that was the question. And there are a few links out there, but you'll find them on Maven searching for MSAL. Which, by the way, maybe we can also highlight that if you do that search, you will also find a third library, which is a library that will help you persist your cache to disk in encrypted form on Windows, Mac, and Linux.
Thank you, Henrik. And did you introduce yourself originally when you came on?
No, I was trying to stay anonymous. Yeah, my name is Henrik. I'm an engineering manager also on the let's call it the MSAL and ADAL team in Identity Platform.
Cool, thank you, Henrik. So I did find Alexander's question. We are an ISV company. Would it be much value for partners and the co-sell team if we were to build an app that provides visibility into effective user roles, access rights, token claims, application roles, and all other usually hidden objects and attributes? We're targeting large corporations with 20,000 plus users. Well, I could tell you this: if you were to build an application like that, we would love to. Well, what can I say? We think it would be great. It would be awesome. It would be awesome if you had an application like that, and probably you would find a good audience amongst large corporations that were interested in being able to have that kind of information. I hesitate to say that we would point to your solution or such, because usually those kinds of things involve a business arrangement between Microsoft. We don't single out people in our ecosystem unless we have a business arrangement with them of some kind, because we love all of our partners. We love everybody who builds on our platform and helps customers with our platform. So there's nothing that we would say don't do that. We think this would be wonderful. But if you work for an ISV company and you do this for a living, then you're probably used to the whole thing where when you ask a customer what they want, they always say yes. So yes, we would love you to do that. I get to be in the seat of the customer for this one. We have no objection to that. It would probably be a wonderful tool for customers. And then let's see, we've got just about, we're right actually at the top of the hour. So it's 9 o'clock. I know there are other sessions, 9 o'clock here in the Pacific Northwest. I know there's other sessions going on. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'd like to thank everybody who attended this community session. It was great to be able to talk to you. Thanks for asking awesome questions. I hope we did a good job answering them. And you can always find us by looking for the Azure Active Directory blog. That's where you're going to see information about the things that we do and links to documentation and other drill down information about the capabilities that we build. I want to thank all of the presenters who are here today for staying up pseudo late here and answering questions. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of Build, and stay safe, everyone.